Okay, you know what this is. It's not really a surprise. Colloquial greetings. They really don't mean anything. Kind of. This is a review for I Don't, A Contrarian History of Marriage by Susan Squire. This book was published in 2008 by Bloomsbury Publishing, and it has 193 ratings on Goodreads. This book is supposed to be about the history of marriage. It's pretty self-explanatory. Yes, these are bonobos having sex on the cover. They even have the full picture in the back. That's monkey sex. This book is problematic. Just laying it out there. The main problems I had with this book was that it really wasn't the history of marriage. This book was totally Eurocentric. It didn't look at other cultures' concepts of marriage. It did not look at that many other religions' concept of marriage. It just pretty much looked at traditionally how the Western society has looked at marriage. Not the history of marriage in general, because there are many different marriage types, and this book totally ignored it. This book pretty much looked at the concept of marriage from the biblical accounts, so from the Jewish interpretation of marriage all the way up to the Reformation, which is around 500 years ago. If you're looking for a book that actually extrapolates concepts and ideas of marriage from 2,000 years ago and to extrapolate how those views have affected how we view marriage today, you're not going to find it in this book. The fact that it calls it the contrarian history is a bit misleading, because a lot of the things that it points out, everyone really already knows. Everyone already knows that marriage used to be, you know, women were property and women couldn't own anything. Women essentially served the husbands. They were considered to be the gateways to sin, and that's why men needed to control them. Yada 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 yada. I mean, everyone already knows this, so to bring it up as if it's like a new thing really annoyed me. Another thing about this book was that it was super snarky. Uncalled for snarky. It would literally quote a Bible passage, and then at one point it's like, so in other words, you fuck 'em, you own 'em. And when you want to claim that you're going to give an objective view of the history of marriage, you probably want to refrain from really flippant, angry, snarky language for people to take you seriously. And I just couldn't take Susan Squire's argument seriously. I totally agree with her premise that the Western concept of marriage has not been favorable to women, but this was not the way to go about it. There were spelling errors and there were grammatical errors, and it's just things that are easy fix. It just seems like this is just like a massive, well-researched rant that someone posted on the internet, and then they decided to publish it. It's well-researched. She has sources, and she does interpret certain sources, but when I read certain interpretations of things, it seemed like, I don't think that means what you think it means, and also, oh yeah, you misappropriate, like this person really didn't write that, this person really didn't say that. And even though she pretty much only talks about the Western concept of marriage, she's not even consistent with cultures, religions, or time periods. In the beginning, she looks at the Bible's version of marriage, the place that women have in marriage and society, and then the next thing you know, we're looking at Athens' concept of marriage. So you pretty much jump ahead like 1,000 years suddenly into Greek culture. How does that translate from Jewish? And then the next thing you know, you jump to Romans, which were after the Greeks. Yes, they had a similar pantheon. And then she goes into the medieval era. It's so disconnected. So she pretty much starts with Jewish concept of marriage, jump ahead 1,000 years, then suddenly you're in the Greek concept of marriage, and then jump ahead, I don't know, a few hundred years. Then now you're looking at Roman concepts of marriage, jump ahead a few hundred years, and then now you're looking at the medieval concept of marriage. And through those jumps, you didn't even look at the transitions of how religion has affected the culture, because you can't really extrapolate the Jewish concepts of marriage and the treatment of women and just tie it into like the Greeks and the Romans, since I don't know if you know this, but they weren't Jewish. They were pagans. Really, it seemed like she looked for the most egregious examples of how cultures have treated women. She disregarded all other evidence, and she cherry-picked the worst examples, and she put it all in a book. And she just wanted to skip to the parts where marriage was worse for women. And I think that's a really horrible way to make an argument. It makes you seem like you might be prone to throwing out evidence when you're faced with evidence for the contrary. I don't think that there's any contrary evidence that a Western historical account of marriage has been detrimental to women. Being very patriarchal, women didn't have very many freedoms, and also with those witch trials, they mostly targeted unmarried women, so women died, yes, but you ruin your argument when you just pile on the worst case scenarios just for the sake of shock value, because you're not really learning anything. You're just trying to shock people. I don't know what was her goal. It's like to hate men. I would suggest, instead of this book, Elaine Pagels' Adam and Eve and the Serpent. I thought that was a very well-rounded book. Yes, and it explained right off the bat that it's talking about Judeo-Christian's concept of marriage and women. She did reference that book. I mean, it was kind of obvious. But pretty much read that book instead of reading this book. The Eurocentricness of it, her language, her crude language, and just how she cherry picks her evidence to back up her arguments really, I think, weakens her arguments and really weakens this book. And don't get me started on the spelling mistakes and the grammar mistakes. I don't know if the editor actually even read this. It was really annoying. So I give this book 1 out of 5 stars. Yeah, not a good book. This is a do not read unless you want to get pissed off. That's all I have today. Talk to you guys later. Bye. That's monkey sex.